acre from there. And also, I don't want to say the names of the people, but you'll know, Manana Lane, where it's at North Lake Way, Onondaga North Lake Way, Deborah Lane North Lake Way. Their sprinklers are taken out all the time. Their hedges are taken out. I mean, it's disgusting. And I think that there has to be, when I look at this map, there is nowhere for them to traverse, which tells me they should not be in the north end. They're blocking, the trucks get stuck all the time. And I think for north of Wells Road, or at least north of, there's just no street they're allowed to take. So do you understand what I'm saying? I still think we need a limitation on the truck weight or truck size.
You've gone into a different territory.
Yeah.
What this does is it's a tool for the contractors and permitting PZ&B for how are we going to get you from A to B without doing damage, and getting them to realize that the side streets aren't an alternative route. Where you're going is we're going to regulate what trucks are allowed to use any roads. That's a very different conversation, and we've bumped up against that a couple times, and the question always is, how are we going to regulate that, and how are we going to enforce that? And that's very, very different than what you're talking about with this backup.
Well, at least if you have signs and there's a truck up there that's not supposed to be up there, they can get a ticket. The second thing is, if a truck that is larger than is supposed to be there is seen on the construction site, it had to get there. So it means it traversed where it wasn't supposed to. I just think the problem is I'm getting still an incredible amount of phone calls and people who are upset. And this map just proves it to me. There's nowhere for a truck to turn around. So what do you end up with? Either someone's property damaged, a safety issue because someone's walking and could get run over by the truck, like I saw with the truck that was backing up 6 blocks and almost ran over a woman with her baby in carriage because they were stuck at Mediterranean, which that's another area I think needs to be marked, is Lake at Mediterranean. But I think my feeling is we're going to need to do more. This is going to be, and I really appreciate all these maps, because these maps show me that those trucks shouldn't be there to begin with, because everything's red. There's just nowhere to turn. So I think this is a great start, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. But if we're not limiting when we meet with them with the trucks logistics, the size of the trucks, then we're still going to have all the landscape being run over.
Again, where this conversation goes is regulating the streets and what trucks can use the streets, as opposed to trying to minimize the impact. This step, what we're proposing, we believe will minimize the negative impact, and will get people thinking about it, and we force them to consider using smaller trucks, smaller loads, all of those things during permitting. What you're describing is a prohibition of certain vehicles on public roads.
Which I think it's a conversation we can continue having. Okay. What we wanted to do for you all is move the needle, and this is narrow. I conceded at the beginning that this is not the end all be all, but we think it will help, and we're happy to continue having a conversation about broader regulations. But in the meantime, we'd like to implement this, and as Wayne said, it's going to be effective to some degree, because it's going to cost people money if they're not behaving. So perhaps we can finish up with this. I mean, we appreciate the feedback on the maps. That's great. We'll tweak some things here. But is there anything else regarding this plan that you all have?
I do have one more question, which relates to what I was just talking about. Are you, in the truck logistics plan, able to tell them you're going to be turning onto Deborah Lane? That is not wide enough for you to take, whatever pound truck or an 18-wheeler or whatever it is. Are you able to say your trucks need to be small? And if you've got to bring a big one in for trees or something else, we're going to have to figure out how to do that. So, I mean, that might help.
Yeah. Let me defer to Wayne, but my understanding is that there's a conversation that happens if we see something that's concerning. Of course, there are some really tight streets where projects are going to be on. People aren't supposed to drive down Deborah Lane to get to another street. We're gonna try to avoid that from happening. But if there is a project that happens on Deborah Lane, we're gonna have that conversation with them about the limitations of that street so they can plan for the right size vehicles. Wayne, am I speaking out of turn, or is that conversation the types of conversations we have?
Those are the types of conversations we should be having, we will be having with these maps, and with this new direction, we can begin that.
Okay. So, and is there any way to go, and this may be a skip question, because as we know, the site that is so tight on Deborah Lane has had trucks that have been destroying over and over again because there's just nowhere to go, certain properties. Is there any way to go to them because of the damage that's been done? And I know there are cameras that people have been looking at from property owners. Is there something that can be done to make them do better in what they're doing now? And this goes for any property, but especially that one, because the damage has just been horrible.
Yeah, we're talking about property damage liability. Ben, what have we done in the past when we've been able to identify, or maybe Wayne, what have we done in the past when we've been able to identify who committed the damage?
Typically, they call the police department. We have a police officer go out when the property damage report is done. Most of the time, it becomes a civil matter where the property owner then sues the company or just contacts the company. From what I've heard, and I can't prove this, most of the companies pay once the police report is done and they're identified.
But I think I'm going more proactive. So if you find out that we've had 3 property damages from a certain construction site, do we have the ability for Wayne now through this program to be able to go to them and say, these trucks need to stop? We're showing you this map, the trucks, it's obvious. We've had 3 issues. You've taken out their sprinkler systems. You've taken out this. You cannot do those kind of trucks unless you contact us and we work out a way for you to move through there without damaging other property. So I'm not talking about paying back for the debt. So that's a civil matter. What I'm talking about is prevention in the future when we know there's been so much damage in the past.
I think to answer your question, Julie, it would fall under the 3-strike program. So there'd be fines in violation and a strike. It would be very difficult initially for any of us to go out there and shut the project down.
Right.
But the 3-strike program is something that we can enforce easily. Not easily, something we can do and work together as a team to do. And then at the 3rd strike, the project would stop.
So property damage is included in what can cause a strike? Or is it that the truck size or the truck, because you're going to tell them to go, let's just take a street that doesn't have construction. Let's take Via Mañana. It's an easier thing because we're not pointing at a house. So let's say 100 Via Mañana keeps turning and damaging the property. Can you say to them, you must use smaller trucks? What can you do when we know that there have been all these issues? Can they get a strike if they're taking a truck on the designated street because they live on there, but it's too big for the street?
If they're following the truck logistics plan, then there's nothing that we could do.
Okay,
If
but
they're following the route that they provided and we approved.
But can you go back to them and tell them they need to use smaller trucks in their deliveries other than where they are essential to be large? I think that's my question.
If I could, Julie,
Yeah.
nobody's bringing a bigger truck than what they need because it costs them more money. And there isn't a way to build a house or do a project without some large trucks. The concrete block delivery, the cement delivery, the pump, you mentioned delivering trees. You can't get a smaller truck to deliver those trees. So as much as we through the logistics plan, can corral where they go and minimize the large trucks. There isn't a way to tell a contractor, you can't bring a big truck to a construction site. It's not feasible.
But there are some things, Paul, and again, the reason I bring up Troy Moshmeyer is because he owns a company. And he said what we can do on those streets is bring 3 smaller trucks with the blocks instead of bringing 1 big truck. So that's kind of what I'm talking. Yes, there are certain, I've seen trucks up here that are huge with the tiniest little piece of equipment that can't get around our streets. So
the trusses come pre-assembled. Rebar comes at specific lengths. We can try to make it better. You can't eliminate large trucks on the north end if we're going to have construction. That's just the reality.
Yeah, I think I think we're all saying the same thing. I think that, you know, there are certain vehicles that there isn't a smaller option. But anytime a contractor can use smaller vehicles and multiple trips, you know, we can ask them. We can't force them. But I think that, you know, we're going to get some voluntary compliance. I think the contractors are going to want to try to do the right thing. They're not going to want to get into civil situations for property damage. You know, what we don't want to do is promise something that we know is unrealistic, and that's forcing contractors to minimize the size of their vehicles, because the size of the vehicles are going to be reflective of the needs for whatever it is they're transporting. And, you know, certain things we can't. Yeah. So I think I think we're all on the same page here.
Ted has his, would like to say, I'm sorry, Ted, I didn't see.
No, not a problem. I was going to shift back to the maps if everyone was finished on, I had just, or you can wrap the discussion and then I'll pivot.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. One question, I noticed that the neighborhood between Royal Palm Way and Worth Avenue isn't covered with any of the limitations. So Brazilian, Chilean, Australian, and I don't know if that was an oversight or if it was, or if there was a reason for it. But I mean, we had some commercial streets like Sunset and Sunrise are redlined, but that neighborhood is omitted. And I would suggest it probably shouldn't be, because I mean, inevitably some of those streets will be the final destination of construction delivery, but maybe they shouldn't be a pathway on a route.
Paul can verify this. I believe that this, you know, the mapping was done based on the width of paved roads, asphalt width. Is that right, Paul?
Yes.
So these roads in question are wider than those that are redlined.
And we're not, this isn't suggesting that it be your route to a different place. It's just saying that it isn't limited because of width.
Okay.
And the logistics plan very specifically talks about route. So we wouldn't be sending people to these streets. It's just that they're not critical.
Okay.
I have a couple map questions when you're done, Ted.
Go ahead, Julie. Thank you.
I'm trying to remember. So between so you've got, if you go on map sheet number 2,
Mhm.
so you've got Atlantic. You've got Atlantic, and then the next street is not red, correct? What's between Atlantic and Dunbar? I'm trying to remember here. Wells. No, Wells is up there.
No.
The street between Dunbar and Wells Road.
Those are just deep lots, Julie. That's why
Yeah.
it looks like a wide
Yeah.
gap.
There may be an easement or an alley or something there, but there's not a road.
Okay, so
They're
that's
like
probably
180, 190 feet deep, both of those lots. So you put them together, it looks pretty wide.
well, I can see a street. I mean, there are 2 houses there, so between Dunbar and Wells, they're definitely.
It doesn't mean there's a road between them.
There's no road.
Okay.
There's no road between
Okay.
them.
Just being sure, because the one thing we want to make certain doesn't happen, which we had talked about before, and Ted, you bring up a good point on the midsections, is that all of a sudden 3 streets get all the traffic or 1 street gets all the traffic. But I think the logistics plan is a good idea because you can keep,